Hello and welcome to another episode of the lecture series of the environmental science, in which we are trying to comprehensively cover environmental science for civil services examinations. In the today's lecture, the topic is eutrophication. Now in this lecture series, in this episode, we will see what is eutrophication, why does the eutrophication occur, what are the impacts of eutrophication, and how do we mitigate the impacts of eutrophication. Now moving into the lecture. Now what is eutrophication? Now the basic thing is, when the excess nutrients are found in the water body, what are the excess nutrients? Those are phosphorus, nitrogen, and different other nutrients which are not usually present in the water body. Now presence of excess nutrients in the water body is said to be eutrophication. Now how do we identify whether the water is eutrophied or not? There is this indicator that presence of algae or the phytoplanktons over the water surface. In this image we can see that the presence of algae or phytoplanktons over the water surface is the indicator of eutrophication. Let us see things in greater depth in coming slide. Now the question occurs is, why does the eutrophication occur? Now the artificial fertilizers, as we know, N is to P is to K. NPK is being given for the fertilizer for the plants for a better growth, but since the NPK is subsidized by the government, that has been exploited, and as a result excess fertilizers are used in the agriculture domain. Now the excess fertilizers, those eventually, whatever is not used, that eventually reaches the water bodies, and there are blue green bacteria which thrives on the ions. When the excess fertilizers of and NPK reaches the water bodies, their ions are found in the water due to presence of H plus and OH minus ions. Now as a result of that, the blue green bacteria which is present, it thrives on the ion, and as a result dense algae formation takes place. Now when there is layer of algae like this over the water body, then it is difficult for the sunlight to penetrate inside. Now as a result, the low sunlight penetration takes place, and as a result the amount of photosynthesis that happens, that goes down. And as a result, due to in the photosynthesis, we know that there is oxygen which is released, and as the rate of photosynthesis goes down, the production of oxygen also goes down, and as a result there is demand of oxygen, which is known as biological oxygen demand, which we saw in the previous lectures. The demand of biological oxygen is increased, and as a result the BOD which increases. Now in turn microorganisms that feed on the dead body, they are present, and as a result of that the oxygen demand increases. Now anaerobic conditions develop. Okay, anaerobic conditions develop, and those produce toxins which are eventually harmful for the aquatic species. Okay, so this is the overall impact of what eutrophication does. Alright, we saw this in the cycle. Okay, now we'll see the impacts in greater depth again. Alright, now what are the different impacts of eutrophication? Now as a result the BOD decreases, the amount of oxygen present in the water body, it decreases, there is the the presence of species also goes down, and as a result the death and decay of the species increases, and as a result the biodiversity which is present in the uh, aquatic system, it goes down. Okay, so the first impact we see of eutrophication is decrease in biodiversity. Next is, it causes toxicity in water. In the previous slide itself we saw that there are anaerobic conditions. Anaerobic means less amount of oxygen, and less amount of oxygen, it produces toxins. Okay, and those toxins are harmful for the aquatic species. So the impact of eutrophication is also, it causes toxicity in water. Now the next impact of eutrophication is increase in CO2 emission. Now how exactly does this take place? Now see, now this is the algae. Okay, now in this cycle we see that the dead and since the BOD increases and the amount of oxygen decreases, and since the species are not able to get oxygen, they eventually die. Okay, so as dead increase, the dead so as the dead bodies so as the dead organisms increase, they also eventually rise up to the top. Okay, so that is the case. And when the dead body is there in the carbon cycle, we see that the dead also gives out the CO2. Okay, and as a result, when there is decrease in the amount of oxygen, it eventually is harmful for aquatic beings. Death takes place, death of the aquatic species takes place, and that when they decompose, they give out the CO2 in return. So there is increase in CO2 emission due to the eutrophication. So that is how this is related. Now one more impact is invasive alien species. Now how exactly does this occur? Let us see. So this is the pond. Okay, this is the water body. Now in the water body, there are previously the normal species they were present previously. Now as the say amount of phosphorus it increases, it shoots up due to the excess fertilizers present in the water. So as the excess amount of phosphorus increases, the it water has more amount of phosphorus in it. Now the species which were now the species which are able to survive in the phosphorus rich environment or in the phosphorus rich habitat, only those kind of species will be able to survive here as well. Okay, so that means the species which are not present already, like which are not earlier present, but they can thrive in an environment which has excess phosphorus in it, excess phosphorus in the aquatic ecosystem, those can thrive, and those are said to be invasive alien species. So that is one more impact of the eutrophication. Alright, now we saw what is eutrophication and what are the causes of it and what are the impacts of it. Let us see how do we mitigate the impacts of eutrophication. Now the first is very basic and it is very straightforward, that is treating the wastewater before release. And now before we release the water, if we treat the wastewater properly, then we can take out the excess NPK or excess nutrients from it, so that they are free of nutrients before eventually going to the seas or the oceans. Okay, the second one is denitrification. Now what is denitrification? Now the nitrate ions which are present in the water due to excess amount of nitrogen, we can convert them into the nitrogen gas, and once they are converted into the nitrogen gas, they can return to the atmosphere. Alright, so that is said to be denitrification. The third one is reverse osmosis. Now reverse osmosis is something like this. Okay, so in from one side we apply pressure and there is this membrane. Okay, this membrane only allows the water molecules to pass through. Okay, so at now from if we apply pressure, only the water molecules will pass through, and here we will get somewhat purified water. Okay, so that is how we can treat the water before release, and following steps like these we can mitigate the eutrophication, we can mitigate the amount of excess nutrients which are reaching the water bodies, which in turn are giving rise to eutrophication. Okay, so if we control the wastewater at this stage itself, there will be very less chances that it will cause eutrophication later. Alright, so this is the way how we can tackle the threat of eutrophication. Alright, so That is all about eutrophication. In this lecture we saw what is eutrophication, why eutrophication takes place, the impacts of eutrophication, and the mitigation of eutrophication. So that is all in this lecture, and if you have any doubt you can always comment below, and if you like the lecture please do like and share it with your friends. And if you want to see the content like this in future, please consider subscribing to the channel, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.